Jonathan Hoffman. Max received an urgent call from his close friend, Jonathan Hoffman, on May 18, 2012, at 5 p.m. Both were seniors at Farmington Central High School in the affluent West Bloomfield area near Detroit, Michigan. Their friendship had begun in ninth grade during an English class and was sparked by a mutual appreciation for Tupac, one of the most influential figures in American hip-hop. Jonathan confided in Max that he had recently failed a court-mandated drug screening. He had been on probation since authorities discovered a prohibited synthetic substance in his vehicle 2 months earlier. Jonathan expressed concern over his grandmother Sandra's intense anger toward him. At 17 years old, Jonathan had been living in his grandparents' apartment for 9 months following his parents' divorce and their relocation to Arizona. Initially, Jonathan went with his parents to Arizona. However, shortly after their arrival, the family was dealt a severe blow when his younger sister Jessica was diagnosed with a benign brain tumor. This required multiple surgeries and ongoing medical care. Adapting to a new school while coping with his sister's health issues left Jonathan feeling unhappy and despondent. Jonathan was overjoyed when his grandmother Sandra suggested he return to West Bloomfield and stay with her until he completed high school. The prospect of reuniting with friends and familiar surroundings excited him. Nevertheless, not everyone approved of the arrangement between Jonathan and his grandmother. Jonathan's father, Michael, a prominent attorney for many years, had observed some disconcerting traits in Sandra's personality. 74-year-old Sandra Lane, a retired educator and mother of 5, could be exacting and stern. While she cherished her grandson deeply, along with her 85-year-old husband, Fred, the situation presented challenges given the teenager's yearning to reconnect with friends during what should have been a stable final year at Farmington Central High School. Jonathan's father eventually conceded, allowing him to thrive once again at Farmington High School. There, he was recognized as the class clown, an exceptionally intelligent student, and a tech whiz. He had secured a full scholarship to Eastern Michigan University. His peers saw him as a spirited, cheerful, and optimistic individual. That is why Jonathan's call to Max caused such alarm. He did not sound like himself. His voice carried not only concern but also palpable fear. The friends decided to meet later that same day, and Jonathan promised he would text within the next 30 minutes to confirm the time. Max waited for the message, but 40 minutes passed with no word from his friend. Growing impatient, Max decided to call Jonathan directly. The phone rang repeatedly without any response. Unbeknownst to him at the time, Jonathan would never be able to reply again. Just before this incident, around 5:20 p.m., the West Bloomfield Township Police Department received an emergency call from Sandra Lane's residence, Jonathan's grandmother's home. The young caller informed the dispatcher that he had been shot and struggled to breathe over the course of those 3 minutes. He begged for help, stating that he was on the brink of death. The assailant had already fled the scene without seeking aid. The subsequent events were even more horrific. The emergency dispatcher listened as Jonathan frantically called out for help before several gunshots rang out again. His screams of pain were followed by faint words indicating he was dying. Then came a short silence before a woman's scream echoed through the line, leading to an eerie quietude. By about 5:30 p.m., West Bloomfield police arrived at Sandra Lane's condo in the serene Maple Point gated community, a neighborhood known for its low crime rate and predominantly inhabited by retirees. A resident had reported hearing gunshots in this typically peaceful area. As officers disembarked from their vehicle onto the neatly kept lawn, they headed into what would become one of their most chilling calls yet. Another gunshot reverberated from within the residence. Before the officers could make their way inside, a woman appeared at the front door, following the officer's instructions to disarm herself. She was a small elderly woman with fading red hair, her clothes spattered with blood. With her hands raised in surrender, she informed the officers that she had just taken her grandson's life. This revelation stunned the officers, yet it paled in comparison to what awaited them inside. As they entered the condo, the officers were confronted with a ghastly scene. Blood and smudges were present in nearly every room. Bullet impacts marred both walls and furnishings, and empty shell casings littered the ground. Near the entryway lay a discarded 9mm Glock 17 semi-automatic handgun. Subsequent forensic analysis would uncover additional magazines for the firearm hidden within the residence. On the upper floor, police found 17-year-old Jonathan Hoffman sprawled face down in a pool of blood. He suffered from multiple gunshot wounds across his chest, arms, back, and stomach, indicating that many shots were fired at close quarters. Emergency medical personnel swiftly transported him to Botsford Hospital, clinging to hope they could save him. Sadly, by 6 p.m., Jonathan succumbed to his injuries. Sandra was taken to the closest medical facility as a precautionary measure. Medical professionals conducted various examinations to confirm her well-being. The next day, Sandra Lane faced charges for her grandson's homicide and was detained without bail while awaiting trial for either first or second-degree murder, her guilt to be determined by a jury. Throughout this ordeal, she maintained her innocence. News of this incident plunged Jonathan's family, friends, and neighbors into deep sorrow and shock. They all pondered what could have driven Sandra to turn a firearm on her dearly loved grandson. The news of this tragic event spread rapidly through the tranquil neighborhood, with media outlets speculating on various theories. Whispers suggested that Jonathan had failed a drug screening test. Journalists highlighted a narrative involving two neglectful parents who left their substance-dependent teenage son in the care of elderly grandparents. Based on the grandmother's testimony, it was revealed that at the time of Jonathan's passing, he had an illegal synthetic drug in his system, which had previously caused him complications. His death occurred shortly after another sensational incident involving hallucinogen consumption. Just 2 weeks prior, another youth under the influence of drugs assaulted his family with a baseball bat, resulting in a fatal event. Takir Cipriana and his accomplice had consumed a prohibited substance before attacking their parents. Sandra Lane's attorney argued that she had legitimate concerns for her safety due to managing a young man on probation who was difficult to restrain. It was widely reported that this particular drug could induce aggression in users. If an incident similar to Takir's had occurred at Sandra's residence, could her actions against Jonathan be justified as self-defense? This was the reasoning Sandra provided to both the police and jury. She asserted that since Jonathan's return to West Bloomfield, he had become unruly and exhibited aggressive behavior. Sandra claimed that he rarely left the house and mingled with teenagers addicted to dangerous synthetic drugs. Sandra also stated that Jonathan's parents did not inform her about his addiction before his arrival and showed little concern for his activities during his stay. Michael, Jonathan's father, was portrayed as having abandoned him. Jonathan frequently had fits of rage, destroying objects and damaging furniture in his room. When upset or during disputes, he would lash out, even breaking his own possessions like his computer monitor and phone. Authorities confirmed that Jonathan had a history with illegal substances. On March 17, 2011, he was apprehended and penalized for possessing hallucinogenic drugs. Subsequently, in court, he received a 93-day deferred sentence, along with a year of probation and the requirement for random drug screenings related to these substances. Jonathan's acquaintances shared with law enforcement their concerns regarding his drug habit and their efforts to redirect him away from it. Sandra exerted considerable effort to assist Jonathan in reforming his ways, focusing on his academic performance and adherence to her guidelines. Nevertheless, he resisted these attempts, displaying defiance, erratic behavior, and occasional aggression. Fred confirmed that from the moment Jonathan arrived, there were continuous and intense disputes between him and Sandra. She even contacted the police multiple times due to Jonathan becoming utterly unmanageable. She sought assistance from the school as well, but all efforts proved futile. Sandra recounted an incident where Jonathan, under the influence of drugs, lost complete control. This situation necessitated hospital staff to restrain him to a gurney. The elderly woman implored his parents for help. However, his father remained indifferent and did not return to Michigan. Gradually, Sandra began fearing for her safety. She confided in her husband about her concerns regarding their grandson and his disreputable associates. In a bid for self-protection and to safeguard her elderly husband, feeling cornered with no other option, Sandra acquired a Glock 17 pistol for defense in case Jonathan or his friends became aggressive. On the critical morning of May 18, 2012, Lane took Jonathan for a drug test that returned positive for illicit substances. Jonathan was instructed to undergo another test later that day. Upon receiving another positive result, he became furious while in his grandmother's vehicle. He resorted to swearing violently, kicking the dashboard, and at one point seizing the steering wheel, compelling Sandra to halt the car multiple times. Jonathan even attempted to snatch the car keys at one juncture. Upon their return home, the tension intensified. Apprehensive that he might be incarcerated, Jonathan decided to flee immediately to Arizona. He demanded $2,000 and the car keys from his grandmother. She complied with neither request. When Grandpa Fred took the dog for a walk, Sandra felt overwhelmingly frightened and attempted to pacify the teenager to no avail. She retreated to her bedroom and retrieved the loaded pistol, hoping it would compel her grandson to heed her words or at least acknowledge her presence. Upon returning upstairs to Jonathan's bedroom and finding him in the bathroom, instead of complying, the boy hurled insults, kicked her in the abdomen, and struck her on the head. A struggle ensued during which Sandra discharged the firearm. She then fled to the basement in a state of panic, seeking refuge. After a while, she ventured upstairs to check on him, only for her grandson to assault her once more, attempting to wrest the gun away. In the ensuing altercation, she shot again in self-defense. This narrative paints a picture of elderly individuals trapped in a dire predicament that tragically culminated in Sandra shooting her beloved grandson out of genuine fear for her own life. However, questions remain as to whether Lane's account is entirely accurate. As the investigation deepened, a contrasting narrative began to surface, one that was still tragic but considerably more concerning. Initial claims by Sandra regarding Jonathan's alleged violent nature did not align with the experiences of those who knew him personally. Contrary to portraying him as aggressive, interviews revealed that at school, Jonathan was known as humorous and peace-loving. He was always quick to diffuse conflicts with his humor and intelligence. Friends also testified that they had not observed any recent changes in his demeanor. Furthermore, Jonathan was described as having a very lean build, standing at just 1.67 meters tall and weighing merely 50 kilograms, hardly fitting the profile of a physically intimidating person. His stature was notably similar to his grandmother's. It appeared that instances of Jonathan's so-called rage were exclusively reported by Sandra, a claim now met with skepticism. Fred, Sandra's husband, acknowledged witnessing heated arguments between his wife and grandson. Despite being present at home almost all the time, there was never any physical violence. Sandra played a key role in overseeing Jonathan's education, establishing strict expectations, which the teenager had difficulty meeting. Fred even suggested sending Jonathan back to his parents in Arizona. However, Sandra rejected this proposal, contradicting her claim that the boy was unmanageable under her care. Jennifer, Sandra's daughter, told the police that during the 9 months Jonathan stayed with his grandparents, he maintained daily communication with her and visited them monthly. Throughout this period, Sandra never reported any issues between her and Jonathan, nor did she express feeling overwhelmed by his presence. When Jennifer learned about Jonathan's legal troubles involving illicit substances, she discussed possible solutions with her mother. She considered either rehabilitation or sending him back to Arizona. Sandra convinced her that she could handle the situation independently. Reluctantly, Jennifer agreed to leave her son in her parents' custody, a decision that would later prove tragically significant. Authorities were summoned to the Lane household on 2 occasions. The first call came in March 2012, when Jonathan himself dialed emergency services. He was distressed after consuming magic mushrooms and experiencing severe paranoia, fearing for his life. Upon arrival, police noted that he showed no aggression, but was terrified upon seeing them. He eagerly embraced one officer before being secured to a stretcher for his protection and transported to a medical facility. Just 4 days after this incident with magic mushrooms, Sandra Lane reached out to 911 again. She reported that her grandson was enraged and attempting to flee while Jonathan informed the dispatcher that his grandmother was forcibly trying to confine him in her vehicle. When officers arrived, they encountered Jonathan vocally berating his grandmother. The law enforcement officials then proposed intervening with the irate youth. Sandra opted to handle the matter herself. This episode was recorded in the police files as a routine verbal dispute between a guardian and a child, which was settled amicably. However, for the detectives leading the investigation, this case increasingly seemed less about a rebellious teenager spiraling out of control and more about a woman enforcing her authority over a defiant child. The hearing on April 12th regarding the possession of prohibited substances and subsequent probation had evidently enraged Sandra. She believed she could discipline her grandson effectively. Up until that point, Sandra had been resolute in steering Jonathan onto the correct path. Yet, as graduation neared and her opportunities dwindled, this mission began to look like a failure. In that moment, Sandra faced many choices. She could have contacted her daughter or sent Jonathan for rehabilitation. Instead, she acquired a semi-automatic pistol and took several shooting lessons at a firing range. Determined to prevail in this conflict and assert control over her unruly teenage grandson at any cost. 4 days after Jonathan was placed on probation, Sandra Lane applied for a license to carry a firearm. On April 18th, Sandra purchased a 9mm Glock, explaining to the store owner that it was for home protection. She deliberately chose a weapon designed for lethal force, along with ammunition containing expanding bullets intended to inflict maximum damage. After acquiring the pistol, Sandra trained at the nearest shooting range until she became proficient in its use. She kept this new expertise hidden from her husband, who remained unaware of the gun's presence in their home. He was reportedly surprised when he later discovered the extent of her covert preparations. On the fateful day of May 18, 2012, Sandra and Jonathan returned home around 5 p.m. Sandra instructed her husband, Fred, to take their dog for a walk and remain outside until she permitted his return. Their outdoor time extended so long that both Fred and the dog grew weary, eventually sitting together on the grass watching a basketball game. As Fred recounted during an interview, when they heard police sirens, he failed to comprehend the situation. Questions arose as to why Sandra wanted Fred to leave. The action seemed less like that of a woman fearing for her life, and more like a person intent on carrying out a plan without interference or witnesses. If Jonathan had truly been as agitated as Sandra described, it seemed unlikely that Fred would have left them alone. More compelling evidence against Sandra was yet to emerge. At that same time, around 5 p.m., Jonathan was speaking with his friend Max about their evening plans. Max informed police that Jonathan's tone was not angry or excited. Rather, he sounded frightened, worried about failing a drug test and anxious about his grandmother's reaction. Jonathan mentioned that Sandra was furious and had threatened to send him back to Arizona. Sandra claimed that her grandson violently assaulted her, striking her in the head and abdomen before she discharged the firearm. Medical personnel who examined her immediately after the incident found no injuries or bruises. Ballistic evidence revealed that Sandra fired the weapon more than 10 times in various locations throughout the house. 6 bullets struck Jonathan. 2 shots hit his back, suggesting he attempted to flee, while another struck his abdomen as he was already wounded and speaking with a 911 dispatcher. The evidence indicated that Sandra was pursuing Jonathan rather than defending herself. The grandmother was seeking to punish her grandson for his perceived wrongdoing, while Jonathan was attempting to find refuge. At some point, Sandra descended to the basement to reload her pistol, likely while Jonathan went to his bedroom to call 911, then returned and shot him at close range while he lay on the floor bleeding. The final conclusive evidence against Sandra's self-defense claim came from the toxicology report. On April 18th, Sandra purchased a 9mm Glock, explaining to the store owner that it was for home protection. She deliberately chose a weapon designed for lethal force, along with ammunition containing expanding bullets intended to inflict maximum damage. After acquiring the pistol, Sandra trained at the nearest shooting range until she became proficient in its use. She kept this new expertise hidden from her husband, who remained unaware of the gun's presence in their home. He was reportedly surprised when he later discovered the extent of her covert preparations. On the fateful day of May 18, 2012, Sandra and Jonathan returned home around 5 p.m. Sandra instructed her husband, Fred, to take their dog for a walk and remain outside until she permitted his return. Their outdoor time extended so long that both Fred and the dog grew weary, eventually sitting together on the grass watching a basketball game. As Fred recounted during an interview, when they heard police sirens, he failed to comprehend the situation. Questions arose as to why Sandra wanted Fred to leave. The action seemed less like that of a woman fearing for her life, and more like a person intent on carrying out a plan without interference or witnesses. If Jonathan had truly been as agitated as Sandra described, it seemed unlikely that Fred would have left them alone. More compelling evidence against Sandra was yet to emerge. At that same time, around 5 p.m., Jonathan was speaking with his friend Max about their evening plans. Max informed police that Jonathan's tone was not angry or excited. Rather, he sounded frightened, worried about failing a drug test and anxious about his grandmother's reaction. Jonathan mentioned that Sandra was furious and had threatened to send him back to Arizona. Sandra claimed that her grandson violently assaulted her, striking her in the head and abdomen before she discharged the firearm. Medical personnel who examined her immediately after the incident found no injuries or bruises. Ballistic evidence revealed that Sandra fired the weapon more than 10 times in various locations throughout the house. 6 bullets struck Jonathan. 2 shots hit his back, suggesting he attempted to flee, while another struck his abdomen as he was already wounded and speaking with a 911 dispatcher. The evidence indicated that Sandra was pursuing Jonathan rather than defending herself. The grandmother was seeking to punish her grandson for his perceived wrongdoing, while Jonathan was attempting to find refuge. At some point, Sandra descended to the basement to reload her pistol, likely while Jonathan went to his bedroom to call 911, then returned and shot him at close range while he lay on the floor bleeding. The final conclusive evidence against Sandra's self-defense claim came from the toxicology report. Moving on to the next case. Case of Lily James. Lily James was born in May 2002 in Yamba, New South Wales, Australia. She was the cherished first child of the close-knit James family, particularly adored by her maternal grandmother, Barbara. Growing up by the ocean with her younger brother Max, Lily was known for her energetic and enduring nature, with a love for swimming. Her father, who coached water polo at an Anglican girls' school, encouraged her interest. Her friends remembered her as sociable, friendly, and academically talented, always willing to help others, which made her very popular. In her upper school years, Lily's accomplishments in academics, sports, and community life were recognized, and she was regarded as one of the top students. Her remarkable ability to excel in all areas was undeniable. She also had a passion for the dramatic arts, which led her to join the theater and dance club. She was eventually invited to perform at the renowned Woodford Folk Festival, one of Australia's largest annual events. During the festival, she impressed the audience with her performance of a monologue from William Shakespeare's Macbeth, showcasing her skills, charisma, and presence, and securing second place in the theater category. In 2018, Lily passed her beginner's driving test, adding to her list of achievements. Her athletic successes were also notable, as she began pursuing water polo professionally, earning the title of swimming champion in the under-17 category. Her parents were delighted with her accomplishments and celebrated each achievement enthusiastically. By her senior year, Lily had decided to focus on a sports career, and in 2020, she enrolled at Sydney Technological University to pursue a bachelor's degree in sports business management. In 2021, Lily took a new job as a water polo coach at St. Andrew's Cathedral School to gain teaching experience and enrich her college routine. Thanks to her youth, vibrant personality, and passion for sports, she quickly connected with her colleagues, the administration, and her students, striving to find a unique approach for each student and highlight their strengths. It was during this period that Lily met Paul, the new cricket and hockey coach who caught her attention. Initially, their interaction was friendly and limited to mutual greetings, but it eventually developed into a romantic relationship. Lily fell in love, unaware of Paul's true character. He showered her with compliments, gave her flowers, and organized evenings together. They agreed to keep their relationship private due to school policy and Lily's personal beliefs. However, over time, rumors began to circulate, and Lily discovered that Paul had broken their agreement and betrayed her in a negative manner. She felt humiliated and deceived, prompting her to confront Paul and end the relationship. On October 26, 2023, the principal of St. Andrew's Cathedral School in central Sydney sent an email to students and parents at 4:30 a.m., announcing that the school would be closed until the end of the week due to a critical incident. 2 hours later, a second notification reassured families that none of the students had been involved in the incident. However, graduating students sitting for exams were exempt from the school closure. Psychological support was provided to those affected by the situation. A 24-hour consultation center was established in the school library to offer assistance. On Thursday and Friday, forensic teams conducted a thorough search of the school building and surrounding areas. Access to the gym was restricted, and the adjacent shower area was scheduled for demolition. The reason for the school's closure was gradually revealed. On October 25, 2023, around midnight, the body of 20-year-old Lily James, the school's water polo coach, was discovered in the school shower. She had last been seen alive at 7 p.m. Surveillance cameras captured someone following her around 8 p.m., but the pursuer eventually left alone and exited the school. Lily's parents raised the alarm when she failed to contact them, prompting the police to be informed. A night guard discovered her body in a pool of blood with severe head injuries. After recovering from the shock, he called emergency services. Later, detectives invited a family friend to identify the body, which was difficult due to the severity of the injuries. The news of Lily's death provoked an outpouring of grief from the community. Her home was filled with friends, neighbors, and acquaintances offering support to her family. Locals also paid their respects, leaving flowers and toys outside her home, forming a makeshift memorial. In a shocking turn, another tragic death occurred on October 27, 2023, at 8 a.m., just 11 miles from the scene of Lily's death. A man's remains were discovered on the rocks of Diamond Bay Reserve near Focaless, an eastern suburb of Sydney. After the police were called, a rescue team was quickly assembled, including a bomb squad, the Marine Corps, and a rescue helicopter. At 3:30 p.m., they recovered the man's body and transported it to forensic experts for identification. Due to the severity of his injuries from a high fall, visual identification was not possible, so fingerprints were used instead. Experts suspected the man's identity, but required confirmation. Eventually, the body was identified as 24-year-old Paul, who was suspected of committing a crime against Lily James. Investigators now had to piece together the connection between the two fatal incidents and uncover what had occurred between them. Paul's later attempts to make amends and apologize were rebuffed by Lily, who remained unforgiving. She took solace in the fact that their brief relationship had at least revealed his true nature to her. Born in 1999 in the Netherlands, Paul came from a wealthy and prominent family. When his father's job required relocation to Australia in 2015, Paul and his family moved. As an only child, he received excessive attention and pampering, which contributed to his selfish and entitled personality. Paul excelled academically and athletically at St. Andrew's Cathedral School, where he distinguished himself in cricket and eventually became team captain. He was also involved in organizing extracurricular activities and festivals. While some peers found his confidence off-putting, he was charming and charismatic around girls. After graduating in 2017, Paul secured a position as an assistant coach for cricket and hockey. By early 2018, he assumed full management of these sports teams. Despite feeling confident in his new responsibilities, Paul abruptly resigned and returned home to his family for undisclosed reasons. Back home, he pursued further education, ultimately earning a master's degree in sports management. During a conversation with old friends, he revealed that he had refined his coaching abilities, which led to a lucrative job offer from his former employer. By early 2020, Paul returned to his old school. Upon returning to Australia, he reunited with a former friend, and they decided to share housing costs. Paul preferred shared living, despite being able to afford a solo apartment. Their modestly priced apartment was located in Kensington, a suburb of Sydney. Initially, the friends got along, socializing at bars after work. However, a few months later, tensions arose, and Paul chose to live alone due to their conflict. Despite being constantly surrounded by people, Paul felt isolated. His parents suspected he had never had a serious romantic relationship. In March 2020, during an 18-month lockdown in Australia, Paul was trapped in the country, unable to visit his family due to infection risks. The strict quarantine measures affected every aspect of life, forcing Paul to rely entirely on himself. By summer 2021, life had returned to normal, but it became evident that the isolation had taken a toll on Paul's relationships. When he resumed his activities, people noticed a change in his character and behavior. Paul recovered professionally, becoming a key player on the hockey team and maintaining an active lifestyle, even appearing in match advertisements. However, his behavior became increasingly troubling. Friends and acquaintances reported observing him lash out in uncontrollable anger, a side of him they had never seen before. Rumors also circulated at the school that he had an inappropriate interest in female students, often flirting with them and making them uncomfortable. Despite these concerns, Paul remained highly regarded for his coaching skills, which contributed significantly to the team's success in the Australian Hockey League. His personal life, however, began to unravel when his girlfriend Lily ended their relationship. The investigation into Paul's involvement in her murder quickly gained momentum. Surveillance cameras inside and outside the area where Lily's body was found played a crucial role in identifying Paul as the prime suspect. Police also tracked his movements using his cell phone's GPS, and contacted his service provider to determine his last known locations. Investigators were eager to locate the victim's phone, hoping it contained clues about the events leading to her death. After tracing the device's locations, they reconstructed a timeline and discovered that Paul had purchased a hammer at a hardware store a few days before the attack. It appeared that he was consumed by anger and decided to confront Lily violently. Her innocence was evident, but the sequence of events that unfolded led to the tragic outcome. On the morning of October 25th, Lily attended the university and later went to her job in the afternoon. Meanwhile, her ex-boyfriend rented a silver Lexus and drove to the school. He did not enter the building, as he had no classes, and instead waited in the car. After the students left the building, he walked to the gym, concealing a hammer under his jacket. He waited for Lily to finish her training, then followed her as she went to freshen up and take a shower. At that moment, Lily was most vulnerable, and he attacked her, striking her head. According to pathologists, her death was instantaneous, and she did not suffer. About an hour later, he gathered Lily's personal belongings into a backpack and left the building. He drove to Diamond Bay, where he disposed of the hammer in a garbage container. Security cameras recorded him at the reserve at 8:47 p.m. Paul's last known location, as tracked by investigators, was the Gap, a cliff in Sydney's eastern suburb of South Head. The Gap is a popular tourist destination, but also notorious for its history of suicides. Around 10 p.m., Paul used Lily's phone to send a message to someone named James, which ultimately led to the discovery of Lily's body. The reason for this action is unclear. Possibly, he felt remorse and wanted to ensure Lily received help, or he intended to inform her parents of her location. He made a brief emergency call an hour after the incident, but hung up. He then went to the cliff and took his own life, a decision he had reportedly considered for some time. When police arrived, they found the personal belongings of both Paul and Lily, as well as the rented car parked nearby. It appeared evident that he was no longer alive, possibly due to his inability to cope with guilt or face the consequences of his actions. The immediate priority became locating his body. A search operation commenced on October 26th at 9 a.m., with police helicopters and boats patrolling the coastline and cordoning off the area around the Gap at Diamond Bay. No one was found on the first day. The following day, Paul's body washed up on the rocks of the reserve. After an autopsy, Paul was officially declared responsible for Lily James' death. Although it was impossible to hold him accountable due to his own death, the criminal case was closed. His parents received his body and decided to cremate him and scatter his ashes in Sydney, rather than return him to the Netherlands. Lily's funeral was held on November 17, 2023, at her former school in Hoostville, where around 500 people gathered to bid farewell to a beloved student, friend, and coach. The school administration arranged a live broadcast of the ceremony. Reflecting Lily's lively and vibrant personality, her family requested that attendees wear bright colors instead of traditional dark attire. The ceremony was filled with heartfelt tributes to Lily as speakers shared warm and sincere words about her. The James family expressed gratitude to everyone who had supported them during their difficult time. Outside the building, students and colleagues created a makeshift memorial featuring Lily's favorite flowers, accompanied by farewell letters as a sign of respect and admiration. After the investigation into Lily's tragic death was completed, the school management sent a follow-up email to parents, apologizing for the impact of the tragedy and assuring them that the incident was unforeseen and would not happen again. While many were shocked that a place of safety had been breached, the administration encouraged students to view this as an isolated incident and to continue their education with renewed enthusiasm. Renowned forensic psychologist Tim Watson-Monro, an expert in analyzing the minds of both criminals and victims, was consulted about Paul's actions. His analysis revealed that Paul's behavior was characteristic of individuals with inflated self-esteem who cannot accept rejection. According to Monro, Paul did not act impulsively but rather deliberately and without remorse. Monro believed that Paul took his own life to avoid taking responsibility and facing shame for his actions. He described Paul as a narcissistic individual with psychopathic tendencies. Monro also distinguished Paul's case from the tragic tale of Romeo and Juliet, as their narratives were fundamentally different. Ultimately, Paul's pride and ego clouded his judgment, leading him to make devastating decisions. He failed to appreciate the love and companionship of Lily, and instead chose deceit and betrayal. In the end, Paul's selfishness resulted in the loss of Lily's life, as well as enduring suffering for both their families. His actions were a bitter repayment for the care and attention he received from those who loved him. Moving on to the next case. Lisa Maria Kaiser. Lisa Maria Kaiser was born in 1994 into a large family, where she grew up alongside her 8 siblings. It was a large family, but far from prosperous. Her parents were preoccupied with their own problems and did not show love or care toward their children. Furthermore, there were rumors that abuse and violence were prevalent within the household. The events in question unfolded in 2020, at the very moment when the entire world was preoccupied with the fight against COVID-19. In a quiet corner of Ecuador, terrible and unnoticed events were taking place. In the small parish of Pifo, on the northeastern outskirts of Quito, the protagonist of this tragic story, Lisa Maria Kaiser, was born and raised, a woman with an enigmatic gaze whose life story would become a true Ecuadorian nightmare. On that fateful Tuesday, October 27, 2020, Lisa sent several messages to the father of her children, David. The messages were full of despair, as her relationship with David had nearly ended by that time. In her words, she confessed her love for him and revealed her unexpected pregnancy. However, in subsequent messages, Lisa expressed that life was losing meaning for her, and that she had made the inevitable decision to terminate the pregnancy. Throughout the night, she begged David to come to her, but he resolutely refused. His parents also urged him to remain at home, and David followed their advice. In the early morning hours of October 28th, neighbors heard faint cries for help coming from Lisa's home. Looking out, they saw a woman lying on the floor, showing signs of vomiting. The neighbors rushed to assist her and immediately called emergency services. When doctors and police arrived, Lisa was found in critical condition, though still alive. After receiving first aid, she was promptly hospitalized. Inside the house, her children, a 5-year-old girl and a 9-year-old boy, were found unconscious. The doctors were unable to save them, and at that point, their little hearts had stopped. Authorities learned the identity of the children's father and contacted David Acosta, who, upon hearing of the tragedy, immediately arrived at the scene accompanied by his father. He was informed that Lisa was in the hospital and that his children had been found lifeless. After several days of fighting for her life in the hospital, Lisa finally regained consciousness. By that time, investigators, guided by their findings, had presented sufficiently compelling arguments to the prosecutor's office, which issued an arrest warrant for this mysterious woman. Upon her release from the hospital, Lisa was immediately transferred to a social rehabilitation center. The authorities insisted that she undergo psychological and psychiatric evaluations, as her state of mind required further investigation for the upcoming trial. At the rehabilitation center, doctors and psychologists began their work. In a conversation with a criminal psychologist, Lisa spoke about her difficult childhood, where her parents constantly fought and abused each other and their children. Her childhood had a profound impact on her mental state, and moments of parental quarrels and divorce became ingrained in her memories. Such a childhood compelled Lisa to start working at the age of 11 in order to continue her studies. The girl strove to escape from her dysfunctional family and build her future in a different way. The expert report also indicated that Lisa had been subjected to abuse. She spoke about how, after several years of marriage, David, her husband, changed dramatically. He began to humiliate her and eventually raise his hand against her. On the day of the tragedy involving the children, investigators at the scene found several glasses with liquid residue on the table. Later analysis revealed traces of epilepsy medication belonging to one of the children, as well as other chemicals that required identification. Police officers conducted a thorough search of the house, and upon noticing a strange odor in the kitchen, discovered a suspicious area under the utility room. They broke through the barrier and found a lifeless body wrapped in a blanket, showing characteristic signs of having been there for an extended period. Further investigation later revealed that the body belonged to Jamie Yanchiguano, a 28-year-old who had been in contact with Lisa. Jamie had been reported missing by his family several days before the gruesome discovery. According to Rosa Yanchiguano, Jamie's sister, he was last seen on October 18th. Rosa told investigators that after her brother disappeared, Lisa had called several times inquiring about him. Lisa claimed to have received a text message from Jamie, in which he mentioned that illegal substance traffickers were holding him captive and demanding a ransom of $8,000. She strongly warned Jamie's family not to contact the police. This claim became a critical point in the complex investigation, as detectives sought to determine if there were any other hidden victims. During her interrogation, Lissa revealed that in 2020, while working at a cookie factory, she met Jamie Yanchiguano. According to her, they became friends. Lissa stated that she wanted to return to her husband, who allegedly planned to use Jamie for financial gain. David made it clear that if she did not help him, he would divorce her. Later, David gave Lissa a white powder and instructed her to put it in Jamie's food. Once she did, Jamie fell asleep and never woke up. Realizing what had occurred, Lissa, in desperation, attempted to win back her husband but failed. In her despair, she ingested the same poison and administered it to her children. However, the poison did not have the intended effect on her, and she sought help from her neighbors to save herself from the horror that had befallen her children. Following her testimony, investigators conducted a thorough investigation, but found no evidence of David's involvement. No one close to the couple could have foreseen that the lives of Lissa Maria and David Acosta would take such a tragic turn. When they met, Lissa was only 16 years old and still in high school, a dreamy and romantic girl, while David was a strong and determined young man. Their friendship quickly developed into strong feelings, leading to Lissa's unexpected pregnancy. Although their families initially disapproved of the relationship, David's parents supported their son and welcomed Lissa into their home. During difficult times, David's family provided genuine support to the young couple, even inviting Lissa to live with them so she could complete high school. When Lissa turned 18, the couple got married. 2 years later, they were expecting their second child, a daughter. David's parents decided to provide the young couple with their own home, giving them an apartment where they discovered a corner of family happiness. However, over time, their relationship began to deteriorate. Both spouses were unfaithful, leading to mistrust and disappointment. Their once boundless love began to fade. Lissa also reported psychological abuse from David, prompting her to seek help from the police. Eventually, she was granted a protective order, forcing David to leave the family home. At this point, Lissa began to blackmail David, demanding money in exchange for the chance to see their children. In early September 2020, Lissa's life took an unexpected turn when her eldest son began experiencing seizures. In desperation, she took him to the emergency room at Baca Ortiz Hospital. After stabilizing his condition, doctors conducted tests and diagnosed a focal form of epilepsy, a severe condition affecting a specific part of the brain. They advised Lissa to undergo further examinations, including MRIs, and to consult specialists urgently. However, Lissa ignored these recommendations. A month later, her son suffered another seizure and they returned to the emergency room. Reviewing his medical history, doctors discovered that Lissa had not followed their earlier instructions, had failed to complete the recommended tests, and had not seen specialists, leaving her son without essential treatment. They warned her that continued neglect could have legal consequences. Despite these warnings, Lissa disregarded medical advice. A few weeks later, when her son's condition recurred, she called David, who was alarmed by her serious tone. She informed him that a social worker would visit to discuss the situation. To make the waiting time more pleasant, Lissa offered him a drink. However, as David drank, he suddenly felt unwell. His condition worsened, and the social worker had not arrived. David decided to go home to get something to alleviate his discomfort. The next morning, he awoke in a terrible state. He could barely speak because his tongue was numb. Every step caused him pain, and his eyes were sore. His parents insisted on calling an ambulance. David was taken to the hospital, where he spent several days. Tests revealed the presence of a psychoactive substance in his system. Since he had not consumed anything of the sort, David began to speculate how this could have occurred. Eventually, he theorized that someone had deliberately slipped him a substance in a public setting. David was grateful to be alive and realized that what had happened could have ended much worse. In early October 2020, Lissa decided to hire a nanny for her children. Her cousin Patricia recommended her friend Bertha, a responsible 48-year-old woman seeking employment. On Monday, October 5th, Bertha arrived at the young mother's home. Lissa urged her to take a pill, claiming it would prevent infection with the COVID-19 virus, which was at its peak at the time. Asserting that it was a highly effective natural remedy, Lissa convinced Bertha to swallow the medicine and enter the house. They sat down to discuss the babysitter's childcare duties. A few minutes later, Bertha began to feel unwell. She developed a headache, her stomach upset, and eventually she vomited. A short while later, Patricia arrived. She explained that she had called her cousin repeatedly, but Lissa had not answered, which raised Patricia's concern. Deciding to check on her cousin, she immediately went to Lissa's house. Upon entering, she found Bertha lying on the couch, nearly fainting. Lissa explained to Patricia what had happened and expressed her concern. Noticing that Lissa still had not called an ambulance, Patricia did so herself. Shortly afterward, doctors arrived and transported Bertha to the hospital. The victim's condition stabilized, and doctors diagnosed poisoning by a toxic substance, which can occur from exposure to certain medications. The medical team determined that Bertha had an adverse reaction to a component of the COVID-19 pills Lissa had given her. A few months before this incident, in June of the same year, Lissa's former acquaintance, Mark Escanto, had died of poisoning. At the time, the cause of death had gone unnoticed. However, given the emerging circumstances, investigators revisited Mark's case. A search of his home revealed Lissa's fingerprints on the glasses used the night before his death. This discovery added new evidence, suggesting possible involvement by Lissa. Suddenly, a new accusation emerged from Lissa's own family. They reported to the police that on September 2nd, during a family gathering, Lissa had offered everyone a drink of her own making. 7 of her siblings, along with her parents, consumed the beverage and immediately became ill. Fortunately, no one died, but the 56-year-old mother suffered a stroke. Lissa's father claimed that while family members were seeking medical attention, Lissa stole $1,300 from the house. Consequently, the investigation now included not only crimes against the children and a former boyfriend, but also an incident endangering the lives and health of her own family. The unusual events did not stop there. Investigators also examined the death of Jose Luis Arrezo, a friend of Lissa's, who was found dead in May of that year. A few days before, Jose had disappeared, and neighbors detected a foul odor, prompting them to alert authorities. The initial examination concluded that he had died of a heart attack, with no suspicious circumstances noted. However, one of Jose's sisters suspected foul play and kept a bottle of alcohol found in his refrigerator. Additionally, the family noticed that several items were missing from his home. Lissa and Jose had been friends, and after his death, Lissa contacted his family by phone. Speaking in a distressed voice, she claimed that Jose owed her a large sum of money and that she needed to collect it. This attempt failed, but shortly afterward, Lissa called again, disguising her voice, claiming to be a friend of Jose's, and asserting that she was pregnant by him and needed to seek child support. Though Jose's family did not believe her, Lissa persisted, making a third call. She stated that she knew who had caused Jose's death and offered to meet to reveal the details. Had she not been apprehended on charges of murdering her own children and Jamie, the list of victims could have become longer. When the media covered the arrest of Lissa, who had poisoned 3 people, Jose's relatives understood the situation. They promptly reported their suspicions to the authorities, and Jose's body was exhumed for forensic analysis to determine the actual cause of death. The relatives were correct. Traces of poison were discovered in the remains of the deceased. On December 22, 2020, a hearing was held for Lisa Maria Kaiser regarding the murder of her 2 children, whose names and photographs were kept confidential, and for Jamie Ianchiguano. The trial was conducted virtually due to restrictions related to the spread of the COVID-19 virus. Lisa had been participating from a social rehabilitation center. The prosecutor's statement indicated that Lissa administered a toxic mixture of insecticides and anti-epileptic drugs to her children. During interrogations, she claimed that she had become desperate and could not leave her children with her husband David, who did not care for them. In truth, she admitted that she wished them dead. At the conclusion of the hearing, the judge issued a court pass for the defendant and ordered her remanded in custody pending trial. The children's trial subsequently took place in 2021 at the Pichincha Provincial Court. The prosecutor presented a collection of evidence to establish Lissa's guilt. Among this evidence were statements by David, who disclosed the content of messages his wife had received on the eve of the tragedy. In one of the messages, she stated that she would take with her what belonged to her, referring to the children. She wrote that she did not know where her children and herself would go, heaven or hell, but now she felt as if she were already in hell. Lissa added that she did not expect her husband to forgive her because she knew he hated her, and now he would hate her even more. David also described his unstable relationship with his wife. At the hearing, the defendant's reconstructed testimony was presented, indicating that she took 2 pills that day, called for help, and then passed out. According to the reconstruction conducted by the prosecutor's office, the daughter died while still in bed, and her older brother attempted to take a few steps to call for help but fell and also died. The conclusion of the forensic medical examination was unequivocal. The children died as a result of a premeditated crime. Their deaths were caused by suffocation due to pulmonary edema and intoxication from a mixture of epilepsy medication and other unspecified substances, presumably insecticides and disinfectants. The prosecution also charged Lissa with the death of Jamie Ianchiguano, whose body had been found bricked up in the kitchen. The perpetrator was additionally suspected of attempting to kill David and members of her own family. The hearing highlighted Lissa's negligent attitude toward her son's health following his diagnosis with localized epilepsy. The mother disregarded instructions for further tests and follow-up examinations, and when the boy was hospitalized again, his condition worsened due to her own negligence. Warnings from medical professionals failed to alter her approach to her son's treatment, resulting in the threat of termination of her parental rights. Investigations into Lissa's mental health revealed her to be highly emotional and dependent on her environment. She sought constant attention and understanding from others and experienced severe anxiety when events did not proceed according to her plan. She also displayed a tendency toward self-harm. She attempted to end her life at least 3 times, but each attempt was unsuccessful. Witnesses described her as insecure, attachment-seeking, and exhibiting schizoid and erratic behavior. The results of the psychological evaluation further emphasized that on the day of the tragic events, Lissa acted with full awareness of her actions. After a prolonged trial lasting 10 months, Lissa Maria Kaiser was found guilty of the crime against her children. The Pichincha Provincial Court sentenced her to 34 years and 8 months of imprisonment. Additionally, she was ordered to pay David compensation exceeding $20,000. The press noted that Lissa remained composed throughout the proceedings, showing emotion only when her children were mentioned. The Jamie Ianchiguano murder case, which began in August 2021, appeared to remain unresolved. New details emerged during the court hearings. Lissa admitted giving her friend a white substance mixed with alcohol, claiming she had obtained it from David. However, the investigation proved otherwise. According to a psychiatrist who interviewed Lissa, she did not intend to kill Jamie. She sought to intimidate his family in order to extort money and demanded $8,000 as ransom. Experts described the plan as disorganized, which ultimately contributed to the crime. Furthermore, forensic tests revealed that the situation was more complex. Jamie was found to have poison in his system, and the cause of death was determined to be strangulation. His body was discovered with a shattered rib cage and wire around his neck. Lissa claimed that after her friend died, she decided to bury him under a back room and encase him in cement. The store owner's testimony confirmed that Lissa purchased building materials during the days of Jamie's disappearance. Following the parties' arguments, the prosecutor's office requested a new trial in April 2022. During that trial, an additional charge of extortion was filed. Lissa contacted Jamie's relatives, claiming he was being held by a group of gangsters and demanded $8,000 for his release. The defense relied on the absence of conclusive evidence linking Lissa to Jamie's murder. Nevertheless, she was found guilty and sentenced to 22 years in prison, as well as ordered to pay $5,000 to the victim's mother. While Jamie's trial was ongoing, the investigation into Mark Escanto and Jose Luis Arrezo, Lissa's alleged victims, was nearing completion. Mark Escanto was 48 years old, and tests conducted after his death revealed traces of the same substance that Lissa had administered to her children. In addition, Mark was found to have severe inflammation of the stomach. The family's lawyer claimed that Lissa met Mark, offered him a beer, and then added poison to the drink. A glass bearing Lissa's and Mark's fingerprints, as well as a swab containing the woman's DNA, was submitted to the authorities. Alleged motives for the murder included jealousy and money. It is also known that Lissa had asked Mark to assist her financially, and there is evidence that he lent her at least $1,120. Mark was Lissa's first known victim. The final outcome of this case, as well as that of Jose Luis Serrazzo, remains unknown. They may not have been reported in the press, or the investigation may not yet have reached the stage of formal charges and trial. At the time of her brutal crimes, Lisa Maria was only 26 years old. Her high-profile criminal case has become one of the most horrific and disturbing in Ecuador's recent history. These crimes made her infamous throughout the country as Dona Venado. Lisa Maria Caiza is recognized as a serial killer in Ecuador. Her victims endured extreme suffering, and their relatives experienced unbearable pain. The charges include 5 murders and 9 attempted murders. Under Ecuadorian law, the maximum sentence she could face is 40 years in prison. That means Lisa could be released when she reaches 70 years old. It remains unclear what motivated Dona Venado to commit such horrific acts. Was her behavior the result of resentment for not obtaining what she expected in life? Many speculate that money was the motive. In David's case, Lisa acted out of a desire for revenge, which led to the tragedy involving her children. The most horrific aspect of this story is not only the number of victims left in the wake of Dona Venado, but also the fate of 2 innocent children who could not have imagined that their mother, who gave them life, would take it away in such an absurd and cruel manner. Moving on to the next case. The case of Magali Part. Magali Bertrand was born on January 17, 1982, to Eric Bertrand, a truck driver, and Evelyn, a homemaker. She was the eldest of 5 siblings and grew up in the town of Loncrenz. When she was 12, her parents divorced in 1994, and her father moved to Switzerland to begin a new life with another family. Although she maintained a close relationship with him, Magali chose to stay with her mother in France, as she was deeply affected by the divorce. On July 12, 1998, 16-year-old Magali met 23-year-old Jeffrey Parts. Jeffrey had endured a difficult childhood, growing up in an abusive household with an alcoholic father, Patrick, and spending part of his early years in foster care. As an adult, Jeffrey reconciled with his father and forgave him. Soon after meeting Magali, Jeffrey spent a few days in prison after his ex-girlfriend accused him of domestic violence. When Magali's mother learned about Jeffrey's past, she disapproved of him. This led to conflicts between Magali and her mother, prompting Magali to move in with her father. There, she found employment as a care worker in a retirement home. In 2000, at the age of 18, Magali married Jeffrey. They moved to the town of Ornix, where Magali worked at a DIY store while Jeffrey worked as a painter and decorator. On March 26, 2001, Magali prepared breakfast for Jeffrey before he left for work. While they were eating, she mentioned her intention to walk their Rottweiler puppy to a convenience store to buy cigarettes, a 2.5-mile round trip. However, when Jeffrey returned home from work at 4:30 p.m., neither Magali nor their puppy was there. The kitchen remained messy from breakfast, which was unusual as Magali normally kept it tidy. Concerned, Jeffrey contacted Magali's parents, but they had not seen her either. By 5 p.m., he went to her workplace and discovered she had not shown up for her afternoon shift and had not called in sick. Jeffrey then reported his wife missing to the police. Afterwards, he enlisted the help of a friend with an ATV to search for Magali, calling off the search around 5 a.m. to get some sleep. Later that morning, around 11 a.m., a young man picking mushrooms near his uncle's farm discovered a woman's body. She was partially undressed and had been burned. At first, he thought it was a discarded mannequin, but upon closer inspection, realized it was not. He ran to his uncle's farm, and they contacted the authorities. Investigators were able to identify the body as 19-year-old Magali Parts using Jeffrey's missing person report and some jewelry engraved with the couple's names and wedding date. Near the body, they found a cigarette butt, a knife with its blade embedded in a tree, and a chocolate bar wrapper. A jerrycan filled with petrol was located 300 meters away. Analysis of the cigarette butt indicated it was a Moroccan brand, sold exclusively in Switzerland. Notably, detectives found no evidence of a fire at the location where Magali's body was recovered, suggesting she was murdered elsewhere and her body later dumped in the woods. Magali's autopsy, performed on March 28, 2 days after her disappearance, revealed that she had been beaten, sustaining 12 fractures throughout her body, and then burned, making it impossible for the medical examiner to determine her exact time of death. Additionally, the official cause of Magali's death has never been publicly released. The medical examiner discovered sperm inside Magali's body, indicating that she had engaged in sexual intercourse approximately 48 hours before her death. However, there was no evidence of sexual assault. The examiner also detected a prescription medication for anxiety in her bloodstream, which neither Jeffrey nor Magali's family knew she was taking. Investigators were unable to locate a prescription for this medication in her name. Furthermore, DNA analysis of a cigarette but found at the scene indicated it belonged to Magali, even though she did not smoke that brand. Detectives concluded that the cigarette had been discarded after her death, adding further confusion. Law enforcement began to suspect that the scene may have been staged. None of Magali's personal belongings were ever recovered. However, the Rottweiler puppy was found safe but hungry in the town of Causey, approximately 5.5 miles from Ornix. Despite the rain between the 26th and 28th, the puppy was clean and dry. Puzzlingly, the dog smelled of Magali's perfume, though its leash was missing and never recovered. Although the puppy may have been in contact with the suspect, the police did not subject her to forensic examination and instead returned her to Jeffrey. Investigators traced Magali's last movements and discovered that the day before her death, she had spent time with her husband and 2 friends. One of these friends informed authorities that Magali had mentioned receiving lingerie from Jeffrey's father as a birthday gift that year. At 10 p.m. that day, Magali checked her voicemail and then turned off her phone. Early the next morning, at 2 a.m. and 5 a.m., the uncle of the man who found her body recalled that his dogs had been barking for an extended period, suggesting they may have sensed someone in the woods. Patrick, for his part, never mentioned giving lingerie to his daughter-in-law, Magali. He stated that he visited the couple's house at 10 a.m. on the 26th, the day Magali went missing, to collect the mail, and claimed she was not there. It remains unclear why Patrick's letter was at Magali's house. On the afternoon of the 26th, in San Jennifer, someone attempted to withdraw approximately €400 from an ATM using Magali's credit cards, but failed due to an incorrect PIN. This person also possessed Jeffrey's credit card and successfully withdrew €35, suggesting knowledge of his PIN. Several eyewitnesses confirmed that they saw Magali in the same town on the day she died, between 9:30 and 11 a.m. Her family is puzzled about how and why she would have been there, as it would have been a long walk to purchase cigarettes. Magali, who was 19, and her husband did not own a car. However, all eyewitnesses admitted that they could not be completely certain the woman they saw was indeed Magali. Over the years, Magali's case has received very little media coverage. The lack of progress in the investigation has left her family frustrated, and they have often shared their anguish with the press. Since the murder occurred near the Swiss border, journalists in Switzerland began investigating the case and uncovered multiple shortcomings in the police investigation, including the temporary loss of DNA evidence, which was later recovered, and the disappearance of photographs of tire tracks found at the crime scene. Additionally, the police were so convinced that Magali was the victim of a random attack that they did not pursue further leads. The assault had been extremely violent, indicating that the perpetrator harbored significant anger toward Magali. However, the police did not thoroughly question her colleagues, friends, or family, nor did they examine their vehicles. Law enforcement also believed that eyewitnesses had seen Magali in another town that day, which led them to strongly assume she had gone missing at the time she was last observed. Consequently, they did not investigate alternative hypotheses. Magali's husband, Jeffrey, was cleared as a suspect due to his alibi. In 2004, 3 years after her death, it was revealed that in the months preceding the crime, she had missed work multiple times, though Jeffrey and other family members were unaware of this. 2 years later, Jeffrey and Patrick were taken into police custody for questioning, but were released because no evidence connected them to the crime. Jeffrey has reportedly suggested that he has an idea of who the attacker might be, but he has never publicly disclosed their identity. His father, Patrick, who was questioned regarding the lingerie incident, claimed he was at home when Magali disappeared, though the reliability of this statement remains uncertain. There have been very few updates in Magali's case over the years. In 2015, her father, Eric, raised funds to hire a private investigator. The investigator confirmed what journalists had previously reported, that the police had made several errors during the initial investigation and may have overlooked critical information. In 2016, Magali's body was exhumed for further examination, but the results were inconclusive. After Magali's death, her husband Jeffrey remarried and had 4 children with his new wife. Tragically, he took his own life on September 15, 2018. Magali's parents remain uncertain about his motives, whether they were linked to guilt or grief over Magali's death. Jeffrey's suicide note did not mention Magali, but his new wife stated that the murder had weighed heavily on their marriage throughout. In 2020, investigators re-examined the cigarette but found at the crime scene and discovered fingerprints that did not match either Jeffrey or his father, Patrick. Moving on to the next case. The case of Michael Van Eck. Michael Van Eck was born on August 14, 1987, in a city that had once been a hub for gold miners. He was the only brother to 4 sisters, Natasha, Michelle, Bianca, and Brianna. Michael grew up in a close-knit family with caring and loving parents who worked hard to provide a decent life for their children. His father was an entrepreneur, and his mother fostered a nurturing home environment that encouraged the growth and development of their kids. Michael was a sociable and kind-hearted individual who excelled in school and sports. He even earned a black belt in karate, which gave him confidence and resilience. After finishing his education, Michael trained as an electrician, a profession that offered good earnings and promising job opportunities. He worked at mine number 4 of the Beatrix Mine in the small town of Unison. In 2011, at the age of 23, Michael decided to join a dating site to distract himself from a recent breakup and meet new people. That is when he came across the profile of a sweet, smiling girl who shared his interests. They both disliked loud parties and wanted to find true love and build a strong family. Michael was pleasantly surprised to have found a compatible match online. On April 2nd, he excitedly told his mother that he had a date and was busy preparing for it. He even withdrew 3,000 rand from his account to impress the girl. However, he felt uneasy about the unusual meeting location his friend had chosen, the city cemetery, and did not mention it to his parents. Around 9 p.m. that evening, Michael said goodbye to his family and left the house, getting into his Silver Pool Joe 2007, a gift from his parents for his coming of age. When he arrived at the cemetery, the girl was running slightly late, but she looked stunning in a white dress and greeted him with a smile. They chatted comfortably, and she suggested moving to a more secluded area of the cemetery. There, they found a romantic setup, a blanket and a basket of fruit and wine. After having a glass of wine, the girl suddenly kissed Michael. The pleasant feeling quickly turned to pain and horror as he realized he had fallen into a sinister trap. Chana Van Haren was born in 1991, a time of crisis for her parents. Her mother's pregnancy prompted the couple to postpone their divorce and try to salvage their relationship. However, their efforts ultimately failed, and the home environment continued to deteriorate. Chana's mother made no attempt to conceal her resentment toward her daughter, viewing her as an unwanted reminder of her husband. After the divorce, Chana's mother took the children and left their father behind. Chana suffered from a severe lack of love and attention from her mother, feeling lonely and misunderstood. Among her siblings, Chana struggled the most, becoming increasingly withdrawn and sullen from a young age. She exhibited disturbing behaviors, such as talking about death and creating unsettling drawings. Her grandparents, alarmed by her conduct, suspected supernatural influence and took her to church, where she underwent an exorcism ritual. Chana's mental health continued to decline as she grew older. At age 10, she had a troubling incident in which she threatened a house guest with a knife, prompting her family to seek professional psychiatric help. Fortunately, the medication improved her mood, and her father made an effort to spend quality time with her, even taking her on hunting trips. However, Chana later revealed that she derived pleasure from harming animals, often bringing home dead creatures. When Chana turned 12, she formed a troubling friendship with an older man who introduced her to harmful substances and took advantage of her vulnerability. 2 years later, her mother moved to New Zealand, leaving Chana and her siblings in the care of their father and stepmother. At 15, Chana became involved with a 22-year-old man who had an unhealthy interest in Satanism, occultism, and voodoo cults. Fortunately, by her 17th birthday, Chana's life began to improve. She distanced herself from harmful relationships, successfully graduated from high school, and enrolled in college to study art and graphic design. After abandoning her interest in Satanism and stopping the use of harmful substances, Chana's emotional well-being significantly improved. She excelled in her studies and eventually secured a job in her chosen field. Chana's new job provided her with a supportive community, including colleagues and management, where she discovered her talent for visual arts, earning respect and recognition. She also began dating Warren, presenting to outsiders, including her family and close friends, the impression that her life was back on track. However, beneath the surface, her inner struggles persisted. Her father was especially relieved, hoping she had matured and would soon get married. But an unexpected obstacle arose, threatening her newfound stability. Warren's friend Roy, who claimed to be highly sensitive, sensed a dark and malevolent presence in Chana despite her kind and friendly demeanor. His concerns were dismissed due to the contrast between his perceptions and her outward appearance. One day, Roy approached Chana, asking about Norman, a name that repeatedly appeared in his mind, implying she might be unfaithful to Warren. Chana's response was shocking. She spat in his face and demanded he stop questioning her. Chana's friend Norman was later revealed to be the name of her imaginary childhood friend, Zazzle. This revelation altered the dynamics among their group of friends. At a party, Chana became interested in 24-year-old Martin. Martin came from a respected and wealthy family, unlike Chana. He had a strong relationship with both parents, was intelligent, well-mannered, and performed well academically. However, Martin had struggled with a mental illness since he was 6 years old. He began experiencing hallucinations, claiming that an entity appeared to him, making him believe he possessed extraordinary strength. As Martin grew older, his condition worsened, causing difficulties at school and home. At 14, he was hospitalized in a psychiatric facility and diagnosed with schizophrenia. Although conventional treatment was initially ineffective, his family and doctors eventually found the right medication to manage his condition, except for occasional outbursts of aggression. Chana and Martin, two unstable young individuals, began a romantic relationship. Despite their outward appearance of happiness, their parents were unaware of the issues the couple had faced in the past. As their relationship progressed, it ultimately led to devastating consequences. At first, the couple was social and outgoing, attending parties and interacting with others. Friends recalled noticing cuts on their hands, which they jokingly attributed to intimate experiments. However, over time, Chana and Martin began withdrawing from their social circle and developed an interest in dark practices, including Satanism, voodoo, and occult rituals. This fascination eventually extended to infamous serial killers. In 2011, Martin posted a photo with his girlfriend Chana on social media, captioned "Killers," accompanied by an ambiguous emoji. At the time, no one took the post seriously. However, unbeknownst to others, the couple harbored dark fantasies that eventually evolved into a sinister plan. They wanted to torture and kill homeless people, and even practiced on animals. Their plan was temporarily postponed, as they could not find a suitable victim. Chana created a profile on a dating site and attracted the attention of Michael Van Eck. The couple targeted him for their twisted plan, and Chana suggested they meet in person. Michael agreed despite the unusual meeting location. Chana and Martin meticulously prepared for the date, planning every detail, including what to wear and how to end Michael's life. Chana approached the meeting fully prepared, and the trap was set. Michael fell for the bait, and Martin attacked him from behind with a knife. Despite being stabbed approximately 30 times, Michael resisted, which took the attackers by surprise. Chana intervened, and together they overpowered Michael, who begged them to end his suffering. After the assault, Martin slit his own throat, and the couple began to dismember Michael's body. They severed his legs and decapitated him, placing the body parts in bags. They buried the remains in a shallow grave, unable to dig deeper due to lacking proper tools. They then left the scene with the body parts using Michael's car, which they later abandoned in a troubled neighborhood. The following day, a cemetery worker discovered the grave and alerted the authorities. Meanwhile, Michael's parents were frantically searching for him, and his workplace reported him missing. The police located Michael's car, which led them to the cemetery, where they uncovered the grisly crime scene. Local police were already investigating a mysterious body found on the cemetery grounds, with all indications pointing to foul play. Michael Van Eck's family was brought in, as he had gone missing a day earlier. At the cemetery, Michael's mother identified her son's body by recognizing his personal belongings and distinctive childhood burn scars. The autopsy revealed that Michael had suffered multiple knife wounds and signs of a struggle. The body had been dismembered post-mortem, with a level of precision suggesting the perpetrators had experience with such acts. The evidence indicated the involvement of multiple attackers, given the number and nature of the wounds, as well as the strength required to overpower the victim. DNA testing confirmed the body was that of 23-year-old Michael Van Eck. During the investigation, police seized Michael's phone and computer, tracing his last communication to Chana Van Haren, who had invited him to the cemetery on that fateful night. When questioned, Chana and her boyfriend Martin confessed to their involvement in the murder. Chana's father was shocked by her calm and defiant confession, in which she claimed she had dreamed of committing such a crime ever since she began hunting with him. The couple's lack of remorse shocked everyone, and they appeared to relish the public attention. They had initially planned to take their own lives if caught, but later changed their minds, wishing to live as monsters. The police search of the couple's apartment revealed a disturbing environment. The walls were covered with distorted portraits of Chana, depicting her without eyes, mouth, or ears in various forms. Investigators found disturbing items in the rooms, including ritual objects, animal scalps, knives, and unknown objects. They also discovered the belongings of the murdered victim, including his glasses and wallet. Martin later admitted they had taken the victim's money to fund their next crime. The most shocking discovery was in the refrigerator. The police found the victim's head with his mouth sewn shut, suggesting the couple planned to use it as a ritual bowl. Additionally, the victim's eyes and ears were found in separate containers. Investigators also found the victim's hand and leg buried near the couple's home, along with the bodies of several animals. Chana's diary revealed dark thoughts and plans, indicating that the couple derived pleasure from killing and mutilating bodies. Both Martin and Chana underwent mental evaluations, which confirmed that they were aware of their actions and desired the consequences. In November 2011, Chana stood trial as a serial offender despite the incident being singular. She openly admitted she felt no remorse and wished to repeat her actions. Psychiatrists diagnosed Chana with psychopathic and antisocial disorders, identifying her as a highly dangerous individual. Throughout the trial, she remained emotionless. Chana was found guilty and sentenced to 35 years in prison without parole, with 20 years for murder and an additional 15 years for robbery and dismemberment. Martin defended himself in court, claiming he did not remember the events until he was in jail. He admitted to studying Satanism and occultism, which he believed influenced both him and Chana to commit the crime. During the trial, he apologized to the victim's parents, although his apology sounded insincere. He implied that the victim had merely been in the wrong place at the wrong time, when in reality, the couple had lured him into a premeditated trap. Michael's mother was overcome with grief and struck Martin during one of the sessions. In the end, Martin was also found guilty and sentenced to 35 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after serving half of his sentence. After 2014, Chana and her lover Martin maintained a relationship through letters while he was in prison. In these letters, Martin referred to Chana as a dark goddess and wrote poetic phrases such as, "When you part your lips, words of a dead butterfly spill out, and they fall upon my mystical heart and paint it with sweet poison." However, over time, Chana ended the relationship, feeling that they had become emotionally disconnected from one another. While in prison, Chana exhibited exemplary behavior, teaching her fellow inmates art and theology. Some collectors, fascinated by notorious criminals, paid large sums for a photograph of Chana with her autograph, as well as a print of her hand. Martin also attracted a following with a fan club, which was monitored by the police for a long time to prevent his followers from emulating his violent actions. Despite his circumstances, Martin continued to receive therapy and completed his education through correspondence courses. Ultimately, the case highlights how two unstable individuals, driven by their desires and lacking boundaries, can destroy an innocent life. Furthermore, it reveals how some people, often hiding behind a seemingly normal facade, can harbor dark and sinister intentions. Unfortunately, new acquaintances can sometimes have a profoundly negative impact on our lives, marking a point of no return. Moving on to the next case. The case of Nicole Hutchings. Nicole Hutchings, whom her family and friends called Nikki, was born on June 15, 1983, in San Francisco, California. Even though her biological father was no longer involved, her stepfather, James Hutchings, stepped in and developed a strong connection with her, resembling that of a true father and daughter. From a young age, James treated Nicole as though she were his own child, earning the affectionate nickname Dad from her. As time passed, the family expanded with the arrival of two more children Amanda, and Timothy. After James left the Marine Corps in 1987, he and his wife Robin chose to raise their family in a calmer setting. They relocated to Bend, Oregon, where Nicole experienced her first snowfall. The Hutchings family settled into a cozy 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom home beside the Deschutes River. The river ran directly into their backyard, offering endless chances for fishing. Nicole's parents once brought her to Drake Park, a well-known green space in the city recognized for its year-round activities such as musical nights and outdoor film screenings. It also served as an ideal spot for peaceful nature walks. When Nicole first saw duck sculptures and was still learning to talk, she affectionately began calling her grandfather Grandpa Duck. As she got older, the park stayed meaningful to her and remained her favorite place in the city. Curious and eager to learn, Nicole was enthusiastic about gaining new knowledge. She also enjoyed hiking, crafting, and writing poetry. She attended Mountain View Middle School, where she was well-liked among her classmates, though her straightforwardness occasionally resulted in disagreements. One significant incident led to her expulsion. Nicole finished her schooling in 2004 and returned home. The Hutchings family treasured their time spent together at home. By then, they had moved to a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom residence only a 15-minute drive away from their previous house in a livelier suburban neighborhood at the end of a cul-de-sac. The Hutchings home offered beautiful views of the mountains, especially as Halloween, also called All Saints' Day, approached. Children in Bend, like those across the United States, enjoyed dressing up for trick-or-treating. Nearly every house was decorated, and residents eagerly prepared candy to greet children in costumes at their front doors. By this point, the Hutchings kids had grown older and were more drawn to parties and celebrations rather than trick-or-treating. Nicole was 21, Amanda was 17, and Timothy had just turned 13. On the night of Sunday, October 31st, 2004, Amanda was preparing for her shift at a nearby department store, planning to finish around 8 p.m. Since she didn't have a driver's license, she depended on her parents or Nicole for a ride home. Even though the store was close, Amanda didn't want to walk home alone after dark, particularly on Halloween, so she asked Nicole to pick her up. However, Nicole intended to stay home handing out candy. Their father, James, who worked as a bus driver, offered to pick Amanda up, prioritizing her safety. Before Amanda left, Nicole, looking serious, said she wanted to talk about something important with Amanda once she came back. The day started as usual, with Robin and Nicole cheerfully giving out candy to visiting children. After James returned home and ate dinner, he left to pick up Amanda and take care of some errands. By 10 p.m., when the doorbell rang once more, it seemed too late for young visitors. With Robin occupied, Nicole went to the door and was pleasantly surprised to see several of her friends. They were heading to a nearby Halloween party at a friend's house and wanted Nicole to come along. Nicole was eager to join the holiday fun. She told her mother about her plans to spend the evening with friends. Robin, confident in her daughter's independence, trusted Nicole's responsible nature. She wished her a wonderful time and let her go to the celebration without concern. Little did she realize this farewell would be the last time she saw Nicole's bright smile. The celebration included both familiar and unfamiliar faces, all seemingly enjoying the festivities. Nicole arrived in her regular clothes because she hadn't had time to dress up. The environment was energetic with loud music, and the partygoers took part in typical youthful activities, drinking, dancing, and celebrating until the early morning hours of November 1st. As the thrill of the mysterious night faded and life returned to normal, the Hutchings family began their day following their usual morning patterns. During this time, James observed that Nicole was missing, her bedroom empty. He had returned home the previous night with Amanda and assumed Nicole had been asleep. Robin told him that Nicole had gone to a Halloween party, so James initially thought she might be staying at a friend's house and expected her to come back or call by midday. However, her belongings, including her bag and documents, remained untouched in her room, a clear indication of her unexpected disappearance. Worried, her parents began calling Nicole's friends, hoping to find any clues about where she might be. They spent the night attempting to find her, a step that came before the difficult choice to contact the police. Despite every effort, Nicole's location stayed unknown. At this point, the Hutchings family was overcome by fear, pushing them to reach out to the Bend Police Department. At the station, they were told that Halloween night is considered one of the worst times of the year due to a major rise in criminal activity. During this period, there are many vehicle break-ins, acts of vandalism, alcohol-related crimes, violence, and even deadly incidents. Police typically don't respond immediately to missing adult reports, since many return shortly after. However, the fact that Nicole's money and ID were still at home created concern. The Bend police learned that Nicole was 21 years old, stood 5 feet 5 inches tall, weighed 159 pounds, and had brown hair and blue eyes. Other identifying features included a small gap between her front teeth, a pierced tongue, and tattoos of a rose and a dolphin on the back of her left shoulder. She was last seen wearing a dark burgundy polo shirt with an emblem, black pants, and white sneakers. Detective Brian Kendall from the Bend Police Department met with the Hutchings family to prepare a detailed report. He spoke with Robin, Amanda, and James, who each shared their perspectives. Amanda said her sister wanted to talk about something important that evening. The parents informed the detective about Nicole's ex-boyfriend, Bobby. At first, the family appreciated Bobby because he seemed charming and got along well with them. However, they later suspected he was hiding his real personality, particularly in how he treated Nicole. Detective Brian chose to investigate Bobby more closely. He intended to ask Nicole's friends about the Halloween party, including who organized it and who had attended. At this point, the Hutchings family was extremely worried because there had been no word about Nicole for more than a day. When the detectives questioned Bobby, they asked him about Nicole. He said he wasn't keeping track of his ex-partner, since they had ended their relationship just the previous weekend. Although the detectives were skeptical, a lie detector test indicated he was being truthful. It was later confirmed that he had an alibi for Halloween night, prompting the authorities to search for other leads. The Bend police released a statement requesting any information about Nicole and urging the public to contact Detective Brian. A woman named Mary provided crucial information. She explained that her housemates, Loren Bowers and Craig Whiting, had hosted the Halloween party that Nicole attended. Loren had a girlfriend with 2 children, one 6 and the other 4. Nicole used to visit them frequently to care for the kids, and that was how she met Mary. At the party, everything appeared normal. Many people arrived and left throughout the night, with some bringing along friends. However, the detectives now had 2 individuals they could follow up with. After obtaining their addresses, the police approached Loren and Craig to gather more details. They spoke with Lauren's 30-year-old girlfriend, and Craig was identified as a close friend of the Hutchings family. He often stopped by in the evenings to invite Nicole to parties. Craig recalled last seeing her at the party around midnight, a time when everyone had been drinking heavily, so no one knew where she went afterward. Although their friends were extremely concerned for her well-being, they still hoped she would return. Sadly, she had disappeared without any trace since the event. Investigators questioned other people who had attended, but no one could remember exactly when she had left. Even without definite answers, they continued their inquiry and chose to widen the search beyond the state. Nicole's photograph and detailed information about her disappearance were shared with law enforcement agencies nationwide. With no fresh leads, the investigators decided to examine the backgrounds of both the individuals who lived in the house where the party occurred and the guests who had been there. They needed to begin their investigation somewhere. Craig had no criminal record, but Loren was linked to a questionable incident involving Nicole. Surprisingly, it was discovered that he had been a convicted offender 10 years earlier. Loren, now 34 years old, had been accused of contributing to the delinquency of minors. He admitted his previous mistakes to Detective Brian and offered his help in searching for Nicole as a way to show his reformed behavior. Although this information was troubling, there was no direct evidence connecting Loren to Nicole's disappearance. The investigation was still in its early phase of gathering details. Meanwhile, Nicole's family began a community search in Bend. They handed out flyers with her picture and information, contacted local media, and urged anyone with knowledge to report it to the authorities. Reports surfaced of sightings of her in different areas of the city, though none were confirmed. Even so, these reports offered the Hutchings family a bit of hope. James, who worked as a bus driver, would carefully check Drake Park, Nicole's favorite local place, every time he drove by, hoping to see her. Accepting her disappearance was incredibly hard for the family, who clung to the hope of her coming back. Every knock at the door brought the possibility that it might be Nicole, but it never was. The situation took a darker turn when an informant told police that a man known as Spider had confessed to friends that he killed Nicole and hid her body on his property. Spider's actual name was Danny Shane, a criminal associated with a local gang called the Park Rats, notorious for their illegal activities in Bend, especially around Drake Park. Nicole and Danny had known each other since high school, though Danny had changed significantly since then. The police questioned him. Although they did not know why he would lie about killing Nicole, he was released after passing a lie detector test. The investigation continued. The investigators monitored Nicole's financial and digital activity, including her credit card, bank account, and cell phone. After months of work, they noticed activity on one of Nicole's cards, raising a small hope that she might still be alive. However, this hope faded when Nicole's mother, Robin, admitted she had been using her daughter's credit card. As time passed, communication with detectives became less frequent, reflecting the lack of progress in the case. Life for the Hutchings family grew bleak after Nicole's murder. Amanda finished high school and applied to multiple colleges, including the University of Minnesota. She awaited acceptance letters, but her college dreams felt insignificant after her sister went missing. Eventually, she learned she had been accepted to the University of Minnesota with a full scholarship. Although this news was happy, she felt she could not leave her family during such a painful period. The truth behind Nicole Hutchings' disappearance was fully revealed only after 3 long years. It became evident that someone had been hiding essential information, completely aware of what had happened, but without the courage to tell the truth. In March 2007, a woman named Jenny came to the Bend police station to speak with the detective handling Nicole's murder investigation. Jenny, who had once been in a relationship with Loren and had 2 children with him, was driven by their turbulent history and breakup to disclose what she knew. As an old acquaintance of Nicole, Jenny was initially interviewed after Nicole vanished, but she had lied to protect herself. Later, she revealed that Loren, her ex, had admitted to killing Nicole, even though there was no physical evidence or remains to support what he said at that point. The detectives devised a plan that involved getting Jenny to secretly record a conversation with Loren by using a hidden microphone to question him about Nicole. They set up the meeting in a park where Jenny, under intense pressure, asked about Nicole. Loren, though initially wary, eventually confessed to Jenny. Because Jenny had previously stayed silent, he defended what he did by saying that Nicole posed a threat to their relationship and that he couldn't risk being sent back to jail. She ultimately managed to obtain a confession from him. Loren was taken into custody on March 12 to protect Jenny from possible consequences. Further investigation uncovered that Loren had 2 prior convictions for sexual assault, which resulted in a 2-year prison term. His victims were between 13 and 16 years old. After he was released in 1997, Loren briefly violated his parole and was later convicted of unlawful possession of a firearm, theft, and providing false information to police during an arrest. Loren emotionally rejected any involvement in Nicole's disappearance, accusing his friend Craig of framing him. This accusation was eventually verified as true. Craig, a close family friend of the Hutchings who had lived with them for some time, had gone to pick up Nicole on that Halloween night. He takes a deep breath and admits that Loren had asked him to help kill Nicole. Craig said that Nicole had been spreading rumors about Loren, alleging that he had inappropriately touched one of the children she cared for. If these accusations became known, Loren would end up in prison again. Nicole had learned from the children that Loren behaved inappropriately, including taking a nude photograph of one child. This was a serious claim with potentially severe consequences. Nicole then informed the child's mother about what happened and filed an official complaint with the Oregon Department of Human Services. Faced with the likelihood of being sent back to prison, Loren chose to take extreme action. How did Craig become involved in this? It emerged that Craig had endured a traumatic childhood event that profoundly affected him. When he was 11, his mother's partner beat her to death and concealed her body in the basement under their trailer, where they lived next to the decomposing corpse for several weeks. This likely left a lasting impact on Craig's life. Nevertheless, he defended his actions concerning Nicole by insisting that Loren was like a brother to him. If a brother asked for help, he felt obligated to do anything for him. After several days, Craig eventually agreed to show the detectives where Nicole's body had been buried. By doing this, he escaped the death penalty, yet he displayed no remorse or compassion. The site was deep within a forest about 20 miles from the Halloween party. Craig guided the police to a place among the trees where he claimed Nicole had died. In a shallow grave, Officers uncovered what they believed were Nicole's remains. She had done everything in her power to shield an innocent child and ensure their well-being, only to become a victim of someone who chose to silence her instead of facing the consequences of his horrific actions. According to Craig's account, as early as October 2004, Loren and his closest friend Craig devised a plan to eliminate Nicole. To carry out the plan, they arranged a large Halloween party just before the incident. They drove to an isolated area and dug a shallow grave, roughly 3 feet deep. On Halloween, Craig enticed Nicole away from her home and brought her to the party. They laced her drink with a painkiller, leaving her barely able to stand or move. Completely incapacitated, her friends placed her in a car with Loren behind the wheel and transported her to the predetermined burial location. Nicole, weak and defenseless, was taken to the temporary grave site. There, Loren struck her head with a bat fitted with a heavy metal tip. Craig assumed one strike would render her unconscious, but it only made Nicole stumble as she attempted to rise again. Loren then picked up a branch and struck her repeatedly until she finally lost consciousness. Before Nicole stopped breathing, they removed her clothing and tossed her into the pit, covering it with thick soil. The most heartbreaking part was that Nicole was still alive at that moment, dying alone in the dense woods, betrayed by 2 people she trusted on that horrifying night. When the Hutchings family was notified of Nicole's death, her parents were devastated. Craig, whom they had welcomed into their home, and Loren, a trusted friend of Nicole, deeply shocked them with what they had done. James would never forget the moment he recognized his daughter's dolphin emblem at the coroner's office. He expressed a strong desire to confront the perpetrators personally. However, legal rules made that impossible. Years passed before Loren and Craig acknowledged their responsibility for the vicious assault, each receiving life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The heartbreaking tale of Nicole Hutchings remains a stark reminder of how fragile trust can be and the catastrophic results of betrayal. As her family endured the painful aftermath of her disappearance, they pieced together a chilling story of deception and brutality that permanently reshaped their lives. Nicole's legacy now stands as a powerful testament to the importance of speaking up against wrongdoing, ensuring that her brave effort to protect the innocent will never be forgotten. Moving on to the next case. The case of Roxana Valdez. Roxana Valdez was born in 1957 in a small village in the province of Panterinas, Chile. Roxana married a man whose name is not publicly known, and they had a son together. However, the marriage was unsuccessful, and they separated in 2011. As a single mother, Roxana encountered significant difficulties in her small village, where employment opportunities were scarce. The community's primary occupation was farming and selling produce, and the local schools emphasized teaching agricultural skills. Roxana worked at the Don Gregorio boarding school, which trained students to become agricultural technicians. Her position was that of a night supervisor, responsible for monitoring the students' behavior and ensuring they slept at night. She did not have a direct role in raising the children. Roxana's son attended the same boarding school, as she could not care for him during the day due to her work in the fields. At the boarding school where Roxana was employed, Claudio Muñoz Ramirez served as the head of grounds maintenance. His nighttime work schedule resulted in him meeting Roxana. Despite their 14-year age difference, they found they had much to talk about. Roxana spent many nights discussing school problems and her failed marriage with Claudio. They also shared similarities in their personal lives. Claudio had 2 daughters he adored, but he felt distanced from their mother and had considered divorce several times. However, he remained in the marriage because of a promise he had made to her late father. Over time, Claudio seemed to disregard his promise and began spending more time with Roxana, away from his family. Eventually, he took a decisive step without explaining anything to his wife. He packed his belongings and left their home to be with Roxana, who happily welcomed him into her life. Their relationship progressed quickly, but Roxana ignored several important warning signs. She allowed a man she barely knew into her home, even though she had children who needed her care. While they enjoyed their lengthy conversations, Roxana failed to see that Claudio had a temper and could be harsh. The first major incident happened at the boarding school, where Claudio was responsible for cleanliness. During a scheduled cleanup day, several students refused to participate, which enraged Claudio. He threatened to beat anyone who did not help, even though he had no teaching experience. Whether he would have acted on this threat is uncertain, but the students eventually began cleaning. Later, they jointly complained to the principal about Claudio's threats of physical violence. The principal, displeased with Claudio's behavior, asked him to resign voluntarily. This was a major setback, as the Don Gregorio boarding school was one of the few places in the region offering steady and well-paid employment. After attempting to find work in the fields and at fruit facilities, Claudio realized it was a hopeless effort. He and Roxana decided to search for a better life elsewhere, but they left their son at the boarding school so he could continue his education. They did not want to take any risks by bringing him along. To avoid depending on employers who had previously disappointed them, Claudio and Roxana chose to create their own small business, a fruit kiosk. They relocated to Molina, a commune a few hours from the Chilean capital, known for its vineyards and wine exports. Roxana and Claudio purchased a kiosk near their new residence, secured suppliers for fruits and vegetables, and began their small family venture. Claudio managed the buying and transportation of goods, while Roxana oversaw sales throughout the day. They couldn't afford to employ a worker since it would increase their costs, and they feared that another person might not handle the perishable items correctly. Claudio became visibly distressed and angry when he learned Roxana was pregnant with their first child. It was a moment that required careful thought, but Roxana, swept up in their new relationship and growing business, agreed with Claudio's idea to let her relatives raise the baby after birth. However, Roxana later experienced a miscarriage. After this, Claudio's demeanor altered drastically. He frequently screamed at Roxana and at times became violent. Neighbors, annoyed by the ongoing disturbances, often contacted the Chilean police, the Carabineros, to intervene in their domestic conflicts. On one occasion, when the Carabineros arrived following a call, they discovered Roxana crying and partially undressed, running from the house with Claudio pursuing her. Roxana informed the officers that she was enduring continuous domestic abuse, which had contributed to her miscarriage. The incident left her requiring psychological assistance. Nonetheless, as time passed, they appeared to move past their problems and continued living together as though nothing had occurred. After the incident, Claudio should have faced charges, but Roxana decided to forgive him and offer him another opportunity. She made him vow that it would not happen again. Although Claudio assured her he would change, his previous behavior with his ex-wife suggested his promises might not be trustworthy. Unfortunately, history repeated itself. Claudio stopped physically harming Roxana, but he began going out to local bars at night, drinking excessively and spending much of their family's money on alcohol and encounters with women. Roxana tolerated her husband's conduct, hoping he would settle down once they had a child. In a sense, she was right. After Roxana gave birth to a healthy baby in 2013, Claudio altered his behavior. He quit going out and concentrated on their business, which was expanding and required more focus. They broadened their business by purchasing another kiosk and a vehicle for transporting goods. Roxana also bought firearms for protection since they lived and worked in areas that were not very safe. The family's possessions appeared to grow considerably, yet this progress was only theoretical. In truth, Claudio returned to his old habits, squandering money on alcohol and falling back into violent behavior toward Roxana. Roxana's testimony described how the abuse in their relationship escalated. Initially, Claudio drank occasionally, but the frequency quickly increased. While intoxicated, he would come home, accuse Roxana of imaginary affairs, and inflict physical and sexual abuse. His behavior seemed purposely cruel, even when Roxana was pregnant. This led to a miscarriage in August 2012, plunging Roxana into a long-lasting depression. On one occasion, following his usual pattern, Claudio went to a local bar and did not return until the next morning. Roxana, familiar with his behavior, still felt anxious about him. It was later discovered that Claudio had taken 5 million Chilean pesos, roughly $6,000, which Roxana had obtained from selling her mother's house. He spent this money on alcohol and visits to brothels. Roxana was stunned and felt betrayed when she learned that Claudio had taken the money intended for their shared business, which had been hidden in their daughter's room. When Claudio came home late that evening, Roxana confronted him about the missing money. However, Claudio showed no interest in discussing the matter and instead struck Roxana, admitting he had wasted all the money. This was the final breaking point for Roxana. Without speaking, she went to their bedroom, retrieved a revolver meant for protection against local criminals, and shot Claudio in the chest. Claudio died instantly. Roxana was taken aback by her own drastic action and attempted to stop the bleeding from the gunshot wound, but it was too late. The close-range shot from the .38 caliber revolver was fatal. In her testimony, Roxana expressed deep remorse and acknowledged the wrongdoing of her actions. She admitted that when she retrieved the revolver, her intention was not to frighten Claudio but to kill him. Roxana recalled the many times Claudio had abused and assaulted her and how she refrained from reporting him to the authorities out of fear. She was afraid of being alone, especially after they had a child together. After shooting Claudio, Roxana's main concern was how it would affect their daughter if she were imprisoned and the child sent to an institution. That night, Roxana chose to dispose of the body and report Claudio as missing. She knew the police were aware of his frequent disappearances during drinking binges. As a small woman, disposing of the body was an overwhelming task. She decided to remove it piece by piece, using kitchen knives to sever the limbs and head. The process required 5 knives, as they kept becoming dull. Roxana then boiled the dismembered parts in large pots, all while playing with her young daughter, who remained unaware of what her mother was doing and what had happened to her father. Roxana's deliberate method of handling the body while trying to maintain normalcy for her daughter reflected the complexity and desperation of her circumstances. The day after cooking and cooling the body parts, Roxana packed them into separate plastic containers labeled by body part, hands, legs, head, and torso, and then placed each container into a garbage bag. She loaded the bags into her car and drove to St. Lucia to scatter them on a vacant lot. Before leaving, she cleaned her home thoroughly with bleach. However, once she arrived in St. Lucia, Roxana could not bring herself to dispose of the bags, even though she found a suitable location. Roxana felt nervous during the drive, constantly sensing she was being watched and fearing the police might stop and search her car. This fear intensified into panic, leading her to create a backup plan involving her daughter, where she would pretend to rush her to the hospital if stopped by police. She even considered pinching her daughter to make her cry louder, making the scenario more convincing. Since Roxana could not bring herself to dispose of the remains, she returned home and hid the bags in the garage. She then cleaned the interior of her car with bleach again and visited Claudio's relatives. She told the police that Claudio had stolen a large sum of money and had not returned home for days, but they merely dismissed her claims. Roxana also visited her mother and brother, who were alarmed by her condition. She was not eating, had a vacant expression, and repeatedly asked the same questions. The only question she answered clearly concerned Claudio's absence, claiming he was delayed due to a flat tire while purchasing goods for their store. Overwhelmed by her thoughts and the hidden evidence, Roxana broke down and asked her brother for assistance. When he arrived, she disclosed everything and showed him the containers. Her brother was shocked. Roxana wanted to relieve herself of the burden and share the traumatic experiences she endured with Claudio, but her primary need was for her brother's help in disposing of the containers holding the body. However, he refused, fearing he would be implicated as an accomplice and face police involvement. He insisted that Roxana confess to the Chilean police, the Carabineros, and threatened to do so himself if she did not. Disheartened but with no alternative, Roxana decided to comply. That night, she went to the 4th police station to make a significant statement. The officers, who knew her, initially assumed she was there to report her troublesome husband. However, they were astonished by her revelations. Roxana was arrested immediately. News of her arrest spread rapidly, drawing numerous journalists to the station. As the journalists waited, Roxana was eventually brought out, visibly distressed and in handcuffs. Before being escorted into a police car, she exclaimed, "I was afraid he would kill me one day." At first glance, the case appeared straightforward. Roxana had confessed, provided evidence, and surrendered voluntarily. Nevertheless, prosecutor Monica Bisos was skeptical of Roxana's seemingly easy confession and sought a more thorough investigation. Prosecutor Bisos requested an extension of Roxana's detention to allow for further forensic analysis. The objective was to determine whether Claudio had been alive when his body was dismembered, which could result in a longer sentence for Roxana. The judge approved a 60-day detention to continue the investigation. Meanwhile, Roxana's attorney, Carolina Gutierrez, argued that Roxana had committed the crime under extreme emotional distress, potentially exacerbated by postpartum depression and the domestic abuse she suffered. Gutierrez emphasized Roxana's cooperation with authorities and her voluntary confession as factors supporting a more lenient sentence. However, forensic results later revealed that Claudio had died from a gunshot wound to the chest, disproving the prosecution's theory that he was alive during dismemberment. Consequently, the factors that could have increased Roxana's sentence were dismissed. Another lawyer, Juan Pablo Cardenas, highlighted that the gun used in the murder was registered. He also noted that Roxana had first reported domestic violence to the police just 20 days after they had moved in together. Psychologist Rodrigo Valenzuela conducted a medical evaluation and presented documents to the court demonstrating that Roxana was severely mentally unstable at the time of the crime. This instability, linked to the loss of 2 children, indicated that she was not fully aware of her actions. Additionally, forensic evidence showed that Claudio had a high blood alcohol level at the time of his death on April 17, 2015. Roxana's trial commenced after a year of investigations and evidence collection. During the trial, Roxana refused to make statements due to her distress over media coverage. Prosecutors stressed the gravity of the crime, but were unable to prove premeditation. The defense argued that Roxana acted in self-defense against a man who had brutally abused her for years. The court proceedings in Chile lasted several weeks, capturing nationwide attention. Prosecutor Monica sought a 15-year prison sentence for Roxana. After considering the defense and input from the jury, the judges sentenced Roxana to 6 years in a correctional facility with a relatively lenient regime. Claudio's family, who had hoped for a life sentence or even the death penalty for Roxana, were outraged by the court's ruling. They had already been dissatisfied when the prosecutor requested a 15-year sentence, which they felt was too lenient. The family attempted to downplay any history of domestic violence and argued that Claudio, a financially independent businessman, would not have stolen $6,000 from Roxana. They also claimed that Claudio had confided in them about Roxana's threatening behavior, stating that she often retrieved a revolver from the closet and threatened to kill him. In a press interview, Claudio's sister shifted blame to the Chilean state, arguing that the judicial system is corrupt and fails to deliver justice, as evidenced by the relatively short sentence given to Roxana, which she compared to punishments for minor thefts. Giselle, Claudio's first wife, spoke in his defense. She stated that Claudio had never been violent during their many years together. In contrast, Roxana frequently initiated arguments due to jealousy and possessiveness. Roxana was initially imprisoned, but after serving 2/3 of her sentence, she was transferred to a semi-open educational center in Tala for good behavior. She was allowed to maintain contact with her daughter and was eventually released early. The media reignited public interest in the case, and many people expressed outrage over her early release. However, some individuals, despite seeing Roxana as a murderer, believed her actions were justified, viewing her as a victim. The debate surrounding this case continues to this day. This story highlights the severe consequences that can result when domestic violence is not addressed promptly. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed exploring these intriguing cold cases with me. If you found the video fascinating, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to Cold Case Mystique for more deep dives into cold case investigations. Your support helps me bring you more compelling content. Leave a comment below with your thoughts or any cases you'd like me to cover next. See you in the next video. And remember, the search for truth never stops.